President John Mahama has allayed fears about the entry of 2 Guantanamo Bay detainees in Ghana, adding due diligence was done before the ex-detainees were allowed into the country.
As Commander-in-Chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, the safety and security of this country is of the greatest concern to me, probably than any Ghanaian. I will not take any decision that would jeopardize the safety and security of this country.
But some journalists present feel the president could have done better in tackling some of the most sensitive questions.
To see his countenance change in answering the question, was trying to explain, look, when you tax people and increase taxes, it's never an exciting thing. And I felt he would say, look, this is one of the most difficult things I've had to do. It's tougher than I expected. I'm sorry, but I pledge that we'll make sure we use the money well.
So how did the president fare in giving a vivid account of the state of the nation after 3 years of holding the mantle? Was he truthful? Well, did he answer your questions satisfactorily, or was it another platform to score political points? We'll be interrogating all of these right now here on today's big story. My name is Afriyie. The 2.5 Meet the Press session organized by the presidency mainly highlighted issues regarding security, governance, power and energy, the economy and corruption. Now, President Mahama says there is no need to be alarmed since the ex-prisoners will be under a 24/7 surveillance and cannot plan anything sinister under the watchful eye of the security agencies. In any case, having them in Ghana, he says, gives the country an opportunity to monitor them, and this will be done with the help from the U.S. government. That's what President Mahama is saying.
With regards to Guantanamo, I'm happy you asked this question. There is no monetary consideration, and the U.S. itself would have disclosed if there was any monetary consideration. And so what you're seeing in social media, that I collected 300 million to accept these detainees, is absolutely untrue. The detainees question was a direct request from the United States of America to my government. We have been allies with the United States for a very long time. It didn't start today. We have partnered in a lot of things, and we continue to collaborate in areas of security, in areas of training with our armed forces, in areas of defense. And so when we received a request like this, we said we will appraise it, and based on the appraisal, we will take a decision. Extensive consultation was held both internally and externally. A risk assessment was done by the U.S. itself, and these 2 detainees, Al-Dubi and Benatef, were considered to be the most compliant detainees in Guantanamo camp, and they were put in the lowest risk category in Guantanamo. And let me be clear, people say ex-convicts. They were never tried, they were never charged, they were never convicted. These were 20-year-old boys. At the time they were picked up, they were 20 years old. And I can imagine my own son, who is 20 years old, you know, and the state at which he is. They were picked up, they were taken to Guantanamo, they were interrogated, you know, and investigated, and there was no evidence with which they could be tried or charged. And so 6 years ago, it was the American government decided that they should be released. And so Ghana is not the only country that is an ally of the United States and has accepted these detainees. Indeed, Guantanamo has been a blot on the human rights record of the world, that people are taken and kept for so long, they are not tried, they are not charged, and yet they were detained for as long as 14 years. And President Obama came into office with a promise that he was going to shut that camp because of the human rights issues. All of us condemned Guantanamo as a result of the infringement on people's human rights. And so when America asked, we decided that we will do an assessment. We did that assessment. America itself did assessment and gave us their risk category. It was the lowest risk category. It was also established that they had played no operational role in Afghanistan. Our own national security visited the camp several times and conducted extensive assessments and interviews of these detainees. As Commander-in-Chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, the safety and security of this country is of the greatest concern to me, probably than any Ghanaian. I will not take any decision that would jeopardize the safety and security of this country.
Let's do some analysis now, and we will soon be speaking to a security analyst, Dr. Kwesi Enin. I'm told Dr. Kwesi Enin is already on the line. Good evening to you. Many thanks for joining us on today's Big Story.
Yes, good evening.
Dr. Enin, the president says the security of this nation is is number one, actually, on his list, and so will not do anything to jeopardize it. He further says lots of consultation with security experts and government intelligence team led to the acceptance of these detainees. Should this allay our fears?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think the president, you can hear from the tone of his voice that he's extremely tired, and I'm sure part of it is the shock of the blowback, from a decision that he made with his team that they thought Ghanaians would accept, but which unfortunately has resulted in something else. That's number one. Number two, it's also the fact that, you would notice the different statements that we've heard from government or officials, from these guys being low-level and therefore not posing any fear. But we also do realize that the president in his statement recognizes that, yes, these people themselves may not pose fear or any threat. Those who may pose threat are those who may come from the outside. So their placement in Ghana definitely makes us an attractive point or a potential attractive target.
Those detainees are already here. What should we do?
Well, I think for the first, the president has given us assurance about where they are being, and I think he made that assertion precisely because he wants people to, that these guys are not going to be placed any for unity, in a haphazard manner. But I think what needs to be done is the constant reassurance of the people of Ghana. First and foremost, that these guys are under surveillance. Number two, that the beneficial exchange of information that the president spoke about is actually beneficial to us in terms of our own assessment of what potential security risks that we face, both internally and then the ones that may come from the wider, external area. I think if the information exchange between those who manage security information and those of us who receive and absorb it is transparent, is respectful, it's collegial, then I think people will say, okay, some of these decisions, we have to make them. They are nasty, they are very difficult, but they've been made in our greater good. But I think when they are done in such a manner that when people raise concerns, they feel as if their concerns are being dismissed, then of course it creates more fear. And I think the fear and the hope must be dealt with, they must be responded to, because people generally do have legitimate fear. And I think it's good the president spoke, and I think in the coming days, whatever he said will generate further conversation. And I'm hoping that the managers of that information from the president will be more forthcoming, they'll be polite, they'll be accessible, and they will try to calm people's fear. That I think will go a long way in ensuring we harm the uncertainties that people feel.
And we are safe as a country. Many thanks to you, Dr. Kwesi Enin. He joined us from the UK. Many thanks for your time. Let's do more analysis. Kijang Singh, who was at the presidency, is here in the studio. Kojo, you're welcome on
Thank
today's
you. It's nice
the
to
morning
be
man.
here.
This is not the morning show,
I know,
so today is my turn.
It's nice to be here. It's a
Kojo,
pleasure.
so what were the highlights of the president's encounter with the media?
I think the first and most remarkable part of today's event was the format. It's very different.
Okay.
The president decided that on this occasion, instead of presenting us with some information upon which we would then have to base our questions generally, he decided to basically just stand up and answer any questions that appear to be of concern to the media.
Good.
That, I feel, is a refreshing format. I would love to see a little more of that. It does need some tweaking because as the format stood, there was no room for follow-up questions. Every person had enough time for one question, and that was it. But you could tell that the thinking that went into today's event circled mainly around this particular issue of the Guantanamo ex-detainees.
In the country.
You could tell from the fact that his entire summary, 2/3 of it, was about this one issue. So, this is what he had prepared in advance for the event. So it is a matter of concern for him. For me, there are two things lingering when it comes to the issue of the Guantanamo Bay detainees. The first issue is the fact that, well, we as a country have agreed to keep them within our borders for 2 years. For those 2 years, they are not allowed to leave Ghana. Two problems there. The first one is this. We as a country, and the president echoed this, have condemned Guantanamo Bay and what it stands for. The fact that these people are kept without trial, without any charge, without any conviction, for God knows how long. In this case, these two individuals were kept for 14 years without any trial. Okay, we've condemned this. But now we are extending the limitation of their rights by saying that they can't leave Ghana for a period of time. The president himself says that they are living on a national security compound. Wherever they go, national security will follow them. This is a limiting of their rights. So if we agree that they should never have been incarcerated in the first place, why are we extending their incarceration? Because that's what it is. We do not permit them to leave the country. There's no law internationally that even gives us the right to do that. That's the second problem.
Kojo, you actually asked a question on corruption, and it had to do with retrieving monies owed the state. Were you satisfied with the answers given by the president?
I didn't hear an answer to my question.
Wow.
Yes, I mean, someone else, I believe it was Fifi Banson, had asked a question before me, which also had something to do with corruption. He addressed that question and talked about how there are certain people who had taken the government to court seeking not to pay back the monies that he had called for the Attorney General and other institutions to collect back. My question was that he had called for many things since 2013, and none of them had been done. Even his call for government offices to buy made-in-Ghana furniture had been ignored. So I wanted to know why the people who work for him are not doing what he's asked.
He asked.
He didn't touch that at all.
He didn't touch that.
But perhaps he felt that speaking to the issue of some people taking the government to court would be addressing that, but it was in no way in response to my question.
And the sad thing was that you didn't have the opportunity to ask a follow-up question. Maybe we should listen to what the president said about corruption.
Corruption does not wear political face. Corruption is about systems and strength of institutions. Government is a continuum, and all of us must contribute our quota to the fight against corruption. We have institutional weaknesses, and traditionally what has happened in the past is that accountability is exacted when one government has gone out of power and a new government comes into power. Then it starts investigating the government that has gone out of power. But while the government is in power and issues are happening with corruption, traditionally they have not been investigated. This is the first government. And I made a pledge that any issues of corruption brought to my attention, I will have them investigated and dealt with. But you cannot be an adherent of constitutional democracy and be an admirer of arbitrary justice. There is due process. I was speaking to one of my colleague heads of state, and he said something very instructive. He said, when I was a military ruler, I just arrested the people, and they were guilty until they proved themselves innocent. He said, but today, as a civilian ruler, one, I can't arrest them, but even when I arrest them, they are innocent until I prove them guilty. That is democracy. We can't eat our cake and have it. As I'm speaking today, the Attorney General has been served. Somebody has filed a writ at the Supreme Court to say that the judgment, she had no jurisdiction, the court had no jurisdiction for that judgment they gave in the Woyome case. If we did not have the Constitution and I was head of the military government, I'd have gone and grabbed the guy and locked him up until he's proved innocent.
So here we go. President speaking on corruption.
Yes, and I've got to say, as always, the president talks about what he has done. And you can't argue with what he has done.
But what he will do.
But it's what he hasn't done.
What he hasn't
that
done.
we ask questions about.
Okay.
Because yes, with the example of the National Service Scheme,
right.
He's sacked several people.
Right.
But you have to ask yourself, in cases where people have been found to have done the wrong thing, why are we not seeing prosecutions?
Some of them are even at the presidency.
Indeed. So
right.
you have to ask yourself, has he done enough?
Has he done enough? That's the question. Let's listen to Vitus Azim. He also has a bit on the president's response to corruption issues.
He should, the way he ended, he should not be afraid of the politicization of corruption. If you are investigating and sanctioning members of your own political party, member of your own government, and extending it to members of the opposition that have been found to have engaged in corruption, then you should not be worried about people saying that your party is corrupt. The fact that you are taking action on allegations of corruption would rather vindicate you. People will say that, look, he's even investigating and sanctioning his own party members. So you can forget about the political talkers. But the entire Ghanaian will be happy that you are taking action against allegations of corruption.
The other matter is about the retrieval of funds. And he mentioned that so far, just about 70 million has been retrieved from the companies that illegally were paid by the state. Are you satisfied that that quantum has been retrieved, or a lot more could have been done by the Attorney General?
You see, when you call 70 million, it looks like a big sum of money. But what percentage of the total money that is out there that has been collected? That will make us know whether the effort is worth praising or not. If the 70 million of 1 billion cedis that is out there, then 70 million is nothing. Besides, they negotiated with some of these people and agreed on timelines. Mm-hmm. Have they met those timelines?
Now, with regards to a long-term solution to our power crisis, the president said he is on course. Plus, he has referred the controversial Mary deal to PricewaterhouseCoopers to do a thorough probe and recommend the way forward. Let's now speak with Dr. Ishmael Aka from ASEP. Good evening. You're welcome on today's big story.
Hope you are doing well.
Dr. Aka, what did the president say that struck you? Were you convinced? Did it give you a sense of relief, hope of resolving the power crisis?
Yeah, for me, I think with regards to the power crisis, I think what the president said, that the technical people are working on it, they'll come talk to the public, and that is not going to give another promise or assurance. For me, I think it was fine. Let us wait for the technical men tomorrow to come and address it. But
right.
Where I had issues was the explanation he gave in terms of the tax imposition and the fact that we referred the Ameri deal to Pricewaterhouse. I mean, with regards to the Ameri deal, it is a step in good direction, but a very good step. But I mean, one of the main causes of this whole value for money problem was the fact that we did sole sourcing. And normally sole sourcing brings about rent seeking, corruption, and all those things. Now we want to rectify this. And we sole source. Pricewaterhouse. I mean, how did we select them? What were the conditions? when they bring the report, is it going to Parliament or going to the presidency? There are a number of reports we've had and nobody heard anything. So for me, yes, that is a good decision, but as to what will come next, we don't know. In terms of the taxes, I think that we are not being so fair to the consumer. He said that, yes, we owe, and for that matter, we have to take a hard decision. Somebody will have to pay for it. That is right. We have to invest in DRA and ECG. But what caused the debt? What happened? We don't know. It has not been investigated.
Right.
Inefficiency and so many other factors. So if we don't put a stop to what is causing the debt, and we are just interested in pushing it to the consumer through taxes, almost all the time they're going to impose taxes, and that is unfortunate.
So if we don't address the fundamental issue, we would end up incurring more death and the consumer will be the end loser. Many thanks to you, Dr. Ishmael Aka. We're extremely grateful for your time on today's big story. But what do journalists think about the president's approach to their questions? Let's hear some of them.
As you could see his countenance change in answering the question, he was trying to explain. Look, when you tax people and increase taxes, it's never an exciting thing. And I felt he would say, look, this is one of the most difficult things I've had to do. It's tougher than I expected. I'm sorry, but I pledge that we'll make sure we use the money well. He tried to look at, he's talking about some 27 percentage price. I really didn't get it. Let's be honest.
Eventually, he told us that it was necessary.
And you realize that when there was, in answer to another question, he came back to the taxes because I think he felt himself that he hasn't answered the question well, because he then came back to the tax question like 6 questions afterwards. So, and you could tell that the tax question had been addressed. I feel, for me, is one of the key issues in the year. And I think the government needs a more cogent explanation, because look, you do a radio show, I do a radio show. People are not happy. Fuel price increases, tariff adjustments, new taxes, all within the same month. And people buy credit and the credit runs out within a week. Come on.
There's something refreshing about his answer, though, way down the line after he has tried to answer your question. He says, for the very first time, he said this year is going to be a difficult year. The president has never said that before. Normally, he would say, the medium prospects are bright, etc.
But again,
that's an admission for the first time from a politician that we should brace ourselves for tough times.
That's very transformational, honestly. Let me be very respectful. Every average thinker would see, because you started the year with a tripartite increment in tax.
You know, the president is a good communicator, and he tried to display that. Even though most of the questions, he just touched on it and went. And of course, considering the time that he had, he couldn't have answered all the questions into details. But I feel that he did a good job with it.
Well, my question was about how the president intends to...
Let's do more analysis, because governance expert Dr. Mwakoban is on the phone. Good evening to you, sir. Thanks for joining us on today's big story.
Good evening.
The president has been outlining some policy measures government is taking to address some of the country's challenges. For instance, he talks about retrieving monies owed government. He talks about the 2 detainees from Guantanamo Bay. He talks about the national aging policy, among others. But beyond these, he says it's going to be a difficult year. Why would that be? Is it so because of a gap in governance?
Well, it's because the situation actually has been bad for a long time, and he's been in denial. And I hope now he sees it. At least he says that it's going to be a difficult year. It has been a difficult 2 years already, 3 years, 5 years. And so maybe it's time for him to wake up and see what the rest of us see. Of course, he's president, so he doesn't see everything we see or feel everything we feel. But it's been bad. Maybe he doesn't know it, you know. He's surrounded by people who tell him what they think he should hear instead of what he should hear. Well, for example, he talks about, here's the problem with the president. He can speak well. And because he can speak well, if you're not careful, you would think that he's providing answers when he is not. He's just talking. Right? Every issue you raise, he knows something about it. He will take the issue, he will explain what you said, but no solution.
That's
and then they come up with simplistic solutions like elderly people should be taken care of. Everybody agrees. Do you have the money to do that now? You know? And then when you talk about abandoned elderly person should be taken care of. Everybody agrees we should do that. But they are not only in the cities, right? Those in the villages, they are not abandoned, but they go hungry too. Then he talks about when he starts this program, and then the elderly person will be given a card, and when he goes to the hospital, he'll be taken care of as national health insurance broken down. That one, he didn't say anything. And then this same elderly, abandoned, poor person, when he goes to the bank, he will be served first. What is this person doing in the bank? If he is abandoned and poor, what is he doing in the bank? And so this it comes out as almost saying nice things without providing concrete policies to solve these problems. There are many like that. He talked about for example, the microfinance problem is in Brong-Ahafo region. For his information, it has happened around the country. It's just now hitting Brong-Ahafo. Kumasi, just about all the microfinance companies have shut down. You know, not because of malfeasance. Some of them, of course, you will find people who stole money here and there, but it isn't. It is primarily because of the downturn of the economy. When the economy goes down, the first frontline institution, financial institution, is the microfinance. They borrow money from banks, high interest rate, because the government itself is willing to pay 24%, 25% on treasury bills. What do you expect the banks to do? They're charging 32%.
Certainly, there is a big gap in governance, and I think that government needs to set up, especially in 2016, when we are told it will be a difficult year. Many thanks to you, Dr. Mwakoba, for your time. Really appreciate your time on today's big story. Kijang Singh, it was refreshing to meet the president because you don't get him all the time to talk to, but certainly there were some gaps because you ask a question, you don't have the opportunity to ask a follow-up question. And of course, looking at things, a lot of the questions were not answered. Going forward, what should we do? Or what should the president put in place so that some of these things will be addressed?
I think the president should be deliberate in his efforts to communicate with his people.
Right.
We often see him on CNN, Bloomberg, and other Deutsche Welle,
right,
and all these international...
France 24.
Yes. He needs to patronize Made in Ghana when it comes to the media.
Because he says we should patronize it
Yes,
too.
indeed. We need to see and speak to him more. That's the whole point.
Right.
One of his strengths that we keep being told about is the fact that he's a communication president. He needs to communicate.
Right. So
and you know, communication is about actually speaking to the issues.
Exactly.
You know, Dr. Mwakoba makes an important point.
Right.
The president applied what we in the industry like to call at this juncture.
At this
all right?
juncture.
Now, it's a very simple trick. So essentially, the president has made sure that he's up to date and prepared and abreast on a little bit of every issue.
But not really providing solutions to the questions.
So you ask him a question about microfinance, and instead of him speaking to the problems of those who are standing at the door right now waiting for their money, he moves you quickly to some area that he has prepared on
already.
You know, so it's a bit like the guy in the exam who was asked about goats and he has only learnt about rabbits. So he says, at this juncture, one may ask, what is a rabbit? And he moves on to the one he has learnt about. So it makes it sound like he's answering your question, but really he's just telling you what he has spent time preparing.
I think if the president is a communication man, he should understand our plight as people in the media, because you need to communicate, and in communicating, if you don't communicate well, there will be noise, and that's what we're experiencing now. This is today's big story, being analyzing the president's encounter with the media. He's been speaking a lot about so many issues, but we're worried some of the questions put to him by journalists were not answered. We hope to see that rectified in the next Meet the Press series. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Good evening.